This is the end of our video series on Rob Bell's book, Love Wins. And we're going to look at the last two chapters. The first one won't take long. It's called There Are Rocks Everywhere. There's not much discussed. There's just a few highlights. For example, he starts out awesome in a lot of his ideas. I appreciate it. But he goes back to the idea that all means all. And as I stated in an earlier video, Zodhiates states that all does not necessarily mean all, as in every single person or thing. And the context is important to determine. On page 152, he talks about how people raise support, gather supplies, and travel thousands of miles into the farthest reaches of the globe to share the good news of Jesus with the unreached people, only to have people say, "That's his name, we've been talking about him for years." He then quotes John chapter 10, verse 16. Again, I had to look up the verse reference. "I have other sheep that are not of this fold." Now, again, he takes everything out of context. The context of John 10 is that Jesus is the good shepherd of the sheep, and his initial sheepfold was the Jews or Judaism, but the other sheep, the Gentiles that have not been part of the Judaism, were brought in also. Okay, so it was a Jew-Gentile context, not that people in the middle of a jungle somewhere or a desert somewhere, not that they have been following Jesus, they just didn't know his name. Okay, although I have heard of that happening, so I'm not going to dismiss that. I've also heard of people that are in parts of the world where preaching the gospel is either prohibited or there's not missionaries that have reached that area yet, and they have visions or dreams of a man called Jesus, or a man saying that they needed to follow him. I've heard of that, so I'm not going to discount that happens, but the reality is that the good news has to be preached, and typically he uses human agents, but we cannot discount angels. I mean, in Galatians chapter 1, the first few verses, Paul is speaking about people are preaching a different gospel, and he says if a man or an angel preaches to you a different gospel. So here we see that angelic beings and even demonic beings can preach different things, because we have Timothy that talks about doctrines of demons. Okay, so obviously there can be some supernatural non-human events that lead to people being born again. He then quotes Colossians 1:6, where it says, this same good news that came to you is going out all over the world. It's bearing fruit everywhere by changing lives, just as it changed your lives from the day you first heard and understood the truth about God's wonderful grace. Now, he quotes Colossians 1:6 as being a past tense event, but the text is a type of Greek tense that means it's action that's taking place even in the present, so it's continuous present action. So the gospel is going out all over the world, not that it has gone out, it has and is. So it's a continuous thing. And then, of course, Matthew 24:24 says that the good news, the gospel of the kingdom, will be preached to all nations, and then the end will come, and that's humans that will be doing the dominant amount of preaching. And then he revisits the subtle suggestion, which I brought up in the last video, of polytheism or religious tolerance. There are many ways to the Father. So let's look at that. Page 154. Okay, so he says that Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This is as wide and expansive a claim as a person can make. No, Jesus is the way. So unless the religion you are a part of unless it believes that Jesus is God in the flesh, and and he was raised from the dead on the third day, then that is not expansive. It actually excludes any religion that denies that fact. What he doesn't say is how or when or in what manner the mechanism functions that gets people to God through him. He doesn't even state that those coming to the Father through him will even know that they are coming exclusively through him. Again, it's Jesus and he is the way. He simply claims that whatever God is doing in the world to know and redeem and love and restore the world is happening through him. No. This is so humanistic in its phrasing. The world system is not being redeemed. The world system is coming to an end because the king is returning and he's going to end all rule except his rule. The earth, creation, and those who believe in Jesus Christ, those will be restored, redeemed, all of that business. But the how is only through Jesus Christ. And the Bible very clearly has a when that happens. It's when you confess with your mouth the belief of your heart, which we'll look at in a minute. And so the passage is exclusive, deeply so, insisting on Jesus alone as a way to God, but it is an exclusivity on the other side of inclusivity. What? First, there is inclusivity. Jesus is the only way. Everyone who doesn't believe in him and follow him in the precise way that is defined by the group doing the defining isn't saved, redeemed, going to heaven, and so on. There's that kind of exclusion. You're either in or you're going to hell. Two groups. Okay, so again, he places those that believe he must be born again in a negative light. Then there is inclusivity, the kind that is open to all religions, the kind that trusts that good people will get in, which I've already established in previous videos, and Paul talked about this in Romans. There is not one who does righteousness. There is not one who is good. And even Jesus himself, out of his mouth, said, no one is good but God. That there is only one mountain, but it has many paths. Again, the polytheism, the religious tolerance, the religious inclusion, that all religions lead to the same way, it's right here. This inclusivity assumes that as long as your heart is fine or your actions measure up, you'll be okay. And then there is an exclusivity on the other side of inclusivity. Okay? Now, one thing that's very interesting is reading his book, you literally get confused. And confusion is not from God. It should be simple. There's just all these abstract ideas, and the Bible and its truths are very concrete. This kind insists that Jesus is the way, but holds tightly to the assumption that the all-embracing, saving love of this particular Jesus, the Christ, will of course include all sorts of unexpected people from across the cultural spectrum, which I agree. I think Christians they get sometimes very judgmental and exclusive, so definitely want to, agree with this statement that we need to realize that it will include those with tattoos and gauges and piercings. It will include the Muslims and the Buddhists, that they will, if they are born again, they're a part of the church. If they're not born again, they are not. If a Muslim does not accept Jesus Christ, that Muslim will not enjoy ruling and reigning with him and going to heaven. Same with a Hindu, a Buddhist, even a person who belongs to a Christian church, a Christian denomination. If they have not been born again, they are not going to heaven. It is that clear in Scripture.